shocking truth about the Freemasons. From stonemasons to secret rulers of the world. All the secrets, rituals, and scandals hidden from you. The history of the Freemasons is an explosive universe of unsolved mysteries, dark secrets, and chilling legends that for centuries has relentlessly lured people with its sinister uniqueness and absolute secrecy. The mere burning mention of them instantly ignites an unhealthy curiosity, eerie associations with secret societies, blood-soaked mysterious rites, and dangerously hidden meanings. But what hides behind this glossy facade? Behind this romantic and mystical image lies a shocking, utterly real history that can be traced from the Middle Ages right up to our present day. Get ready to learn everything. The very name Freemasonry comes from the French language and means just stonemason. A stonemason? Can you believe it? And imagine this, it's no accident. Who would have thought, at the very beginning of their journey, these so-called Masons were merely a community of master builders who erected those very majestic castles, cathedrals, and monasteries across Europe. They were united by absolutely unique, deep professional knowledge and unquestionable strict rules of conduct, meticulously passed down from older generations to younger apprentices. And here's where it gets really interesting. To protect the sacred secrets of their craft from prying eyes, they created strictly guarded, closed professional unions, ominously called guilds, access to which was granted only to the initiated. Even back then, over time, a special culture of communication and interaction formed around these building guilds. These weren't just laborers. These weren't ordinary professional communities, but true brotherhoods that bound their members with obligations of mutual aid, support, and the preservation of professional secrets. Within these associations, a strict hierarchy was established, allowing for the effective transmission of knowledge and control over building quality. But time doesn't stand still. Gradually, the significance of the building guilds began to change. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, and with the dawn of the Renaissance, the need for such closed associations of builders gradually diminished, and construction itself lost some of its professional secrets. And that's when the break happened. It was then that the guilds began to transform, gradually admitting people who were completely distant from the building craft, but dangerously close to philosophy and spiritual quests. These new guild members brought with them intellectual and moral ideas, breathing new, mysterious life into the old associations. Thus, the craft guilds gradually transformed into a completely different community, now consisting primarily of thinkers, scientists, and intellectuals, for whom building symbolism suddenly helped express their own philosophical reflections on man and society. Real construction gave way to the allegorical, where stone and tools became metaphors, reflecting man's striving for inner perfection. It is this crucial historical transition from practical building to the philosophical and symbolic that explains why Freemasonry acquired such incredible mystery, and why its symbols became surrounded by a multitude of legends and conjectures. But to understand more deeply how simple craft builders could lay the foundation for a worldwide intellectual brotherhood, we must look to their origins, to those very same medieval building guilds that became the original core of this astonishing phenomenon. Medieval Europe was a world where lofty ideals coexisted with hard labor and the daily struggle for existence, darkness and light. But it was in this era, amidst wars and epidemics, famine and superstitions, that grandiose architectural structures arose, capable of striking the imagination even of modern people. How? Behind these majestic Gothic cathedrals, castles, and monasteries stood the labor of a special group of masters, professional stonemasons united in closed communities known as building guilds. Medieval stonemasons possessed a unique, secret set of skills and knowledge needed to transform a pile of stones into a majestic temple. They were simultaneously engineers, architects, and artists, as they were required not only to erect sturdy walls, but also to create elegant arches, complex vaults, and the most delicate decorations. Mastering these arts required years of training and practice, which were meticulously guarded from outsiders' eyes. Over time, the building guilds became closed professional unions with a strict internal hierarchy and a complex system of knowledge transfer. An apprentice would join the guild as a teenager and spend years studying the craft under the guidance of an experienced master, gradually mastering both practical stone working techniques and the fundamentals of mathematics, geometry, and architecture. When his mastery reached the required level, the apprentice gained the right to be called a journeyman, and then, after demonstrating his knowledge and skills in a special test, could become a master, capable of leading independent projects. Such a strict hierarchy and lengthy training had their reasons. The stonemason's craft included secrets that allowed them to build structures capable of enduring for centuries without losing their beauty and strength. These secrets were precise geometric proportions, the correct ratio of structural elements, special mortar recipes, and stone processing methods. And, of course, the most important thing, the building guilds strove to keep this knowledge within their community, using a system of secret signs, symbols, and rituals understood only by the initiated. But there was more than just stone. The symbolism of the building guilds reflected not only the master's professional skills, but also their philosophy, worldview, and moral principles. The three most important and profound tools were the compass, the square, and the trowel. The compass held special meaning for the stonemasons, as it served as a tool for precise measurement and constructing perfect circles. In a symbolic sense, the compass personified the masters striving for harmony and perfection. For the medieval mind, the circle was always a symbol of divine completeness and order, and the use of the compass in erecting buildings meant embodying the divine plan in stone. Thus, through material objects, the craftsmen expressed the spiritual ideals of their time. The square, intended for creating right angles and perfect accuracy in wall construction, also acquired a deep philosophical meaning. In a world full of injustice and chaos, the stonemasons perceived the right angle as a metaphor for moral integrity and the uprightness of human character. Through the symbol of the square, the masters reminded each other of the need to lead a life based on justice and sincerity, as a necessary condition for successful work and respect within the brotherhood. And finally, the trowel, the tool intended for applying and spreading mortar connecting individual stones into a single structure. Symbolically, it reflected the idea of brotherhood, unity, and mutual support. Just as mortar bonded stones, turning them into a sturdy wall, so did the solidarity of the guild members bind them into a single professional family. The trowel expressed the idea of unity in common labor, respect, and fidelity. All these tools, which became symbols, were used in the rituals and traditions of the guilds. It is here, dear readers, that the root of the mystery lies. Thus, everyday building activity gradually transformed into something more than just a craft. Over time, the professional guilds, preserving these traditions, began to attract the attention of people completely distant from building, but strangely interested in their philosophical and moral ideas. It was then that the gradual transformation of the communities of builders into a brotherhood of thinkers began, who later became known to the entire world under the name Freemasons. A shocking metamorphosis, wasn't it? The transition of the building guilds from practical craft to a philosophical and intellectual community began at the end of the 16th century and developed most actively in the 17th century. During this period, Europe was literally boiling. Medieval Europe entered an era of profound changes. The development of science, the weakening of church influence, and the emergence of new ideas about the world and man created fertile ground for profound changes within the Masonic lodges as well. The doors of these mysterious societies began to open. If previously the doors of the guilds were open exclusively to professional builders and architects, now people of completely different professions increasingly began to enter their ranks. The first of these new Masons were representatives of the intellectual elite, philosophers, scientists, mathematicians, alchemists, doctors, and aristocrats who, apparently, were very strongly interested in the mysteries of the universe and the secrets of human consciousness. They were attracted by the opportunity to study spiritual and moral questions without the pressure of the church and authorities. Among such new members were the well-known Scottish alchemist and physician Robert Moray, the famous philosopher Elias Ashmole, and the Scottish mathematician and astronomer James Gregory. Even then, the powerful of this world were gathering under one roof, one of the first countries where the gradual transition from the building craft to an intellectual community began was Scotland. Why, exactly? There. It was there already in the 17th century that the lodges in Edinburgh and other cities actively accepted people who were completely distant from the practical activities of stonemasons. In these lodges, stone and building tools were transformed into allegories through which philosophical and moral problems were discussed. For instance, Scottish intellectual lodges paid particular attention to the study of ancient texts and legends, and considered questions of morality and man's spiritual improvement. They actively discussed how the symbolism of building tools could be applied to the moral education of the individual. But it wasn't just talk. The members of the Scottish lodges didn't just engage in philosophical discussions. They also created a unique internal culture that combined ancient legends, esoteric ideas, and strict rules of conduct. Lodge meetings took place in a strictly closed environment, by candlelight, surrounded by mysterious symbols and rituals, created based on old building traditions. What were they really doing in the semi-darkness? It was in such an atmosphere that the tradition of accepting new members through initiation developed. A special rite of dedication where the candidate had to demonstrate their understanding of the lodge's moral and philosophical ideas. The lodges themselves usually met in special rooms or even in private homes where they could openly discuss any ideas in a friendly and confidential atmosphere. There, they read and discussed the works of ancient philosophers, medieval alchemists, and modern thinkers. Members could debate the most complex questions of existence and morality without fearing accusations of heresy or violating established social norms. Freedom of speech, behind closed doors. Besides Scotland, a similar transition was also actively occurring in France. And this is even more interesting. In the French lodges of the 17th century, members included not only scientists and philosophers, but also representatives of the highest nobility. Among them were people close to the royal court, who perceived membership in the lodges as a prestigious intellectual pursuit, emphasizing their high social status and education. In these French lodges, intellectual pursuits were complemented by mystical quests and the allegorical study of ancient traditions, including those related to medieval chivalric orders, alchemy, and Kabbalah. Can you feel the atmosphere getting hotter? And then, it happened. In the summer of 1717, an event occurred in London that forever changed the history of Freemasonry and gave it new status and significance. On June 24, the feast day of St. John the Baptist, representatives of 4 independent London lodges gathered at the famous Goose and Gridiron tavern and agreed to create a single central organization, which later became known as the Grand Lodge of London and Westminster. It is from this moment that the history of modern organized Freemasonry is conventionally dated. A shocking date. Before this, Masonic lodges were small and often unconnected associations where philosophical questions and ideas of moral improvement were discussed. Now, the 4 London lodges, located at the Goose and Gridiron, the Crown, the Apple Tree, and the Rummer and Grapes taverns, decided to create a centralized structure, with common rules, traditions, and unified rituals. The end of chaos, the beginning of a system. This step was carefully planned and prepared in advance, as the participants of the meeting understood the need to create a common authority capable of regulating the lodge's activities and increasing the prestige of the Masonic movement as a whole. The first Grand Master of the newly formed Grand Lodge was elected Anthony Sayer, a man with a good reputation among the lodge members, but who held no high positions and had no special influence in society. Just one of the guys. For now, however, in the very first years of the Grand Lodge's existence, it rapidly began to attract representatives of the English aristocracy and social elite. In 1721, the Grand Master became the Duke of Montague, a well-known and influential figure at the royal court. His appointment significantly boosted the lodge's authority, and the participation of aristocrats made membership in it prestigious and fashionable, among England's intellectual and social elite. So, from taverns, straight to the palaces. One of the most important tasks of the new organization was the systematization and formalization of common rules and standards of Freemasonry. The systematization of secret knowledge. It was during this period that the famous three-tiered system of initiation was formed, consisting of the degrees of apprentice, journeyman, and master. The rituals for each degree were meticulously developed and filled with philosophical content, moral lessons, and symbolic actions. These ceremonies were intended to promote the spiritual and intellectual development of a Mason, teaching them the principles of morality and fraternal solidarity. Furthermore, the Grand Lodge of London introduced, for the first time, common constitutional documents regulating the internal order of the lodges. The most famous of these documents is the Constitutions of the Freemasons written by James Anderson in 1723. He was a Scottish clergyman and a prominent member of the lodge. He systematized the rules and traditions, defined the principles of relationships between lodges and members of the Brotherhood, and laid the foundations of Masonic philosophy. These constitutions became the Foundation, of the entire Masonic movement, and were adopted by Masons in many other countries. A secret code of laws, thanks to its organization and clear structure, the Grand Lodge of London quickly gained authority, not only in England, but also beyond its borders. The tentacles began to spread. Representatives of the highest strata of society, prominent intellectuals, and cultural figures began joining the Masonic ranks, drawn by the atmosphere of freedom and the ideals of humanism and tolerance. Among them were philosophers, writers, scientists, and even diplomats, who within the walls of Masonic lodges could freely discuss ideas of enlightenment and social progress without fearing persecution or accusations of violating traditional orders. An ideal platform for secret negotiations. From England, Masonic ideas and organizational principles soon spread across Europe, encompassing France, Germany, Holland, and other countries. Within just a few decades, Masonic lodges would appear in North America too, gaining ever-increasing popularity and exerting influence on the intellectual and political life of entire continents. Thus, the establishment of the Grand Lodge in London was not just a local event. It was a pivotal historical moment, thanks to which Freemasonry acquired its modern structure, clear rules, and international significance, transforming into an organization capable of influencing cultural, political, and philosophical processes in Europe and beyond. Coincidence, or the beginning of a secret plan? But how did one get into this exclusive club? The central event in the life of any Mason has always been the initiation procedure, or initiation. This was a rigorous system consisting of 3 distinct stages that the candidate passed through sequentially, with specific time intervals between them. No rushing allowed. All 3 rites were never conducted at once. A person gradually moved from the first degree to the second, and only after that could they be admitted to the third, the highest degree. Each degree, a new level of mystery. The initiation of an entered apprentice took place in a meticulously prepared lodge chamber. The candidate, unaware beforehand of the ceremony's details, entered the room blindfolded and with part of his chest bared. Sounds rather unsettling, doesn't it? This symbolized spiritual blindness, ignorance, and sincere openness before the brethren. He was met by members of the lodge, who asked a series of questions about his intentions, about whether he was ready to follow the moral and ethical laws of the Brotherhood, to keep its secrets, and to constantly improve himself. What secrets were they hiding in there? After answering the questions, the candidate gave a solemn oath, placing his hand on the Bible or another sacred text for him. What exactly did he promise? Only after this was the blindfold removed. At this moment, he saw the lodge's furnishings and the faces of his new brethren for the first time. The moment of truth. This moment symbolized spiritual awakening, stepping out of the darkness of ignorance into the light of truth. He was then explained the basic principles and goals of Freemasonry, introduced to the initial duties of an apprentice, and given instructions on how he should conduct himself in society and within the Brotherhood. The candidate was admitted to the second degree after some time when the senior brethren were convinced of his diligence and seriousness of purpose. The test was passed. The initiation of a fellowcraft was more complex and substantial, aimed at intellectual development and understanding the philosophy of the brotherhood. During the ceremony, the candidate undertook a symbolic journey through the temple, encountering various obstacles and questions along the way that required him to reflect and interpret symbols. A real quest. The fellowcraft had to answer questions about a man's duties to society and the brotherhood, about the significance of the moral principles of Freemasonry, and demonstrate his understanding of the symbolism he had studied in the first degree. Only upon being satisfied that the candidate had assimilated the moral and intellectual foundations did the lodge admit him to the second degree and give more profound instructions on the duties of a fellowcraft, to explore the world and himself, develop his mind and moral qualities, and serve as an example for less experienced apprentices. A deeper dive into the mysteries, and now the main event, the third degree. Only those Masons who had successfully mastered the first 2 degrees and proven their spiritual and moral development were admitted to the third and most important degree, the Master Mason degree. The elite of the elite, the third degree was the most complex and symbolically rich, representing a kind of drama enacted by the lodge members together with the candidate. A real performance with chilling details. The central plot was the symbolic journey of the legendary Master Hiram Abbot, builder of King Solomon's temple, slain for refusing to betray the secrets of his craft. Murder for a secret. The candidate literally experienced Hiram's fate through the ritualistic play. First, he had to symbolically pass through the temple where 3 lodge members depicted conspirators. Who were these traitors? They stopped him, demanding he reveal the master's secrets. When the candidate refused, he was symbolically struck, first by a light touch on the shoulders and chest, and then gently laid on the floor, portraying his death horrifying. This part of the rite was central. The candidate lay on the floor in a state of complete helplessness, experiencing the symbolic death of his old self. Death for rebirth. Then the Master Masons lifted him with a special ritual gesture known only to the initiated. Behold, the most sacred mystery. This act symbolized the candidate's spiritual resurrection, his new birth, not just as a member of the brotherhood, but as a person with a deeper understanding of the value of life and the importance of moral principles. At the conclusion of the rite, the candidate was explained the meaning of what he had just gone through. Death is merely a symbolic reminder of the transience of physical existence, while true life and immortality lie in spiritual development, fidelity to duty, and moral ideals. The culmination of the third degree ritual was the candidate's full acceptance as a Master Mason, the presentation of his regalia, and the explanation of his new duties related to responsibility towards junior brethren, the lodge and society, and now he is a full-fledged keeper of secrets. But what do these strange symbols we see everywhere mean? Masonic symbols often become the objects of various myths and conspiracy theories, blending ancient legends, religious imagery, and speculation about the secret control of humanity. Could it all be true? However, behind each of these symbols lies a specific history and a deep meaning that, surprisingly, is far more interesting than the most enigmatic conjectures. One of the most famous and frequently discussed symbols is the all-seeing eye, also called the Eye of Providence. This symbol is an eye enclosed in a triangle and surrounded by rays of light. Although today it is perceived by many as something mystical or even frightening, its origin is connected with the most ancient traditions of humanity. Even in ancient Egypt, there was a similar symbol, the Eye of Horus, symbolizing divine protection and wisdom. Later, in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the image of the eye was used in Christian iconography as a symbol of the all-seeing God, observing human actions, but Masons gave it their own special meaning. Masons adopted this Christian interpretation of the symbol, embedding within it the idea of supreme moral oversight. The Eye of Providence on lodge walls was meant to constantly remind the members of the Brotherhood that their actions are always under the observation of a higher power, and therefore every Mason bears moral responsibility for his deeds, or perhaps just a perfect cover for total control. Another important symbol that became one of the central elements of Masonic Lodge decoration is the checkered pavement, consisting of alternating black and white squares. This symbol dates back to ancient concepts of the world as an eternal arena for the struggle of opposing forces, light and darkness, good and evil, an eternal battle. But in Freemasonry, it acquired an even deeper meaning. For a Mason, the checkered pavement symbolizes not only the struggle of opposites, but also human life itself, consisting of constant choices and moral decisions. A Mason standing on such a floor during ceremonies must remember that his life is a series of decisions, each of which can tip the scales towards good or evil, a somber reminder of the consequences of every step. It is a reminder of the importance of moral choice and responsibility for the outcomes of one's actions. Equally significant in Masonic symbolism are the two famous columns, Boaz and Jachin, borrowed from the ancient tradition of building King Solomon's first temple in Jerusalem. According to the biblical narrative, these columns were placed before the temple entrance and symbolized stability and strength, as well as wisdom and harmony, strength and knowledge for Masons. The columns acquired a philosophical meaning, representing the two sides of human existence, the material and the spiritual. Boaz, standing on the left, signified physical stability, the ability of a person to withstand life's difficulties and trials. Jachin stood on the right and symbolized intellectual and spiritual growth, the pursuit of wisdom and inner perfection. The columns reminded every Mason that a harmonious life is impossible without combining the spiritual and the material, reason and willpower, eternal balance, or a fragile equilibrium of power. Finally, one of the most recognizable and mysterious figures in Masonic symbolism became the pyramid, often depicted together with the all-seeing eye. Many associate this symbol with ancient Egyptian structures and occult practices, a link to ancient Egypt perhaps. However, the real meaning of the pyramid for Masons lies elsewhere. The pyramid is an allegory of a person's spiritual ascent, their striving for moral and intellectual perfection. The wide base of the pyramid symbolizes the initial stage of the spiritual path, when a person is immersed in cares for the material and earthly. The upward tapering sides of the pyramid represent the gradual purification and moral elevation of the individual, progressing upwards towards spiritual enlightenment. And what's at the very top? The eye at the apex of the pyramid signifies the achievement of this highest state, where a person is able to view the world from a position of wisdom, spiritual knowledge, and moral purity. Sounds beautiful. But why then does this symbol grace the American dollar? Interestingly, the pyramid with the eye first gained mass recognition through its use on the American dollar in 1782. Although this symbol was not directly created by Masons, many members of the Brotherhood participated in its design. Aha! So they were involved after all. It is precisely because of this that today, the pyramid with the eye is considered one of the main Masonic symbols. Coincidence or something more? Despite the deep philosophical meaning of Masonic rituals and symbolism, persistent myths have formed around the Brotherhood over several centuries, accusing Masons of occultism and even Satanism. Now, this is the real scandal. These accusations did not arise by chance, and are linked to the peculiar nature of the Masonic Brotherhood, its secrecy, its mysterious rituals, and the lack of public understanding of their real meaning. What were they so determined to hide? To understand the origin of these legends, we need to look at history. The first suspicions that Masons were supposedly connected with occultism arose as early as the 18th century, when the Brotherhood actively spread across Europe. Masonic lodges held meetings behind closed doors, and their members maintained strict secrecy about their rituals and internal structure. Nobody knew what went on inside. For the uninitiated, such secrecy looked suspicious and even frightening. In the society of that time, any closed community with incomprehensible rites automatically caused alarm and became an object of speculation. People were inclined to fill the gaps in their knowledge with fantastical and often terrifying stories, and this played right into the hands of their enemies. The Catholic Church, in particular, actively opposed the Masons, seeing them as rivals and ideological opponents. As early as 1738, Pope Clement XII issued a document in which Masons were declared outlawed, and their assemblies were called heretical, anathema, the Church claimed that Masons performed secret anti-Christian rituals, rejected divine order, and sought to destroy the traditional foundations of society. This document greatly influenced the perception of Masons in Europe, giving rise to numerous rumors and accusations that the lodges were supposedly engaged in magic, black masses, and other prohibited practices. The mark of Satan had been placed. Rumors of Satanism in Freemasonry significantly intensified in the 19th century. The darkness deepened. This was the era of Romanticism in Europe, which was accompanied by increased interest in mysticism and occult knowledge. It was at this time that the French writer Léo Taxil appeared, who played a fateful role in shaping the perception of Freemasonry as a satanic cult. In the 1880s, Taxil published a series of books and articles in which he claimed that Masonic lodges secretly worshipped Lucifer, performed horrific satanic rituals, and wove conspiracies against Christianity and society. His works enjoyed immense popularity, were translated into numerous languages, and caused an absolute sensation. The world was stunned. Later, Léo Taxil publicly confessed that his stories were fabricated, and the entire project was originally conceived by him as a hoax, designed to ridicule the Catholic Church and its superstitions. Shock, the hoax of the century, however. The debunking did not completely destroy the myths that had already taken root in the minds of millions. These stories continued to live their own lives, supported by conspiracy theorists, writers, and proponents of conspiracy theories. The lie proved stronger than the truth. Another source of myths about the connection between Masons and occultism and Satanism was certain secret societies of the 19th century that genuinely practiced mystical and occult rituals, while borrowing some elements of Masonic symbolism. For example, the famous Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which appeared in England in 1888, actively used Masonic ritualistic elements, although it was not directly connected with Freemasonry itself. The shadows multiplied. In the public consciousness, such organizations became confused with actual Masonic lodges, reinforcing the myth that Masons were involved in occult magic and secret rites. In the 20th century, the situation was further exacerbated by various conspiracy theories, especially after the publication of the book, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Another blow. This was a forged document that directly linked Masons to a global conspiracy. As a result, the image of Masons as secret plotters became firmly associated with something dark and sinister. At the same time, some totalitarian regimes in Europe, particularly Nazi Germany, used these myths to justify the persecution of Masons, portraying them as secret enemies of society and the state, a bloody crackdown. Thus, legends about Satanism and occultism in Freemasonry were never based on real facts, but formed due to a combination of several factors: the Brotherhood's secrecy, religious and political struggles, and conscious hoaxes by individual authors and organizations. A terrifying cocktail. Despite numerous debunkings, these myths stubbornly persist in the public imagination today, stoking interest in Freemasonry while simultaneously breeding misunderstanding and fear of it. The mystery endures. From its very beginnings, Freemasonry attracted people who sought not only personal spiritual improvement, but also active change in society. Or was it power? Masons inevitably became prominent figures on the political stage, as the Brotherhood's ideals perfectly aligned with the values of the Enlightenment. Liberty, equality, and humanism. A convenient slogan for revolutions, one of the most striking and significant examples of Freemasonry's influence on world history was the American Revolution. Many of America's founding fathers were active members of Masonic lodges. Coincidence? George Washington, the first President of the United States, was not only a Mason himself, but also openly demonstrated his affiliation with the Brotherhood, personally performing the Masonic ritual of laying the cornerstone of the Capitol in 1793, a historic gesture. On that day, Washington was dressed in a traditional Masonic apron, and the ceremony was accompanied by symbolic gestures and the reading of special texts emphasizing the importance of the new state, founded on the principles of brotherhood and equality. No less important was the role of Benjamin Franklin, who not only helped draft the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but also actively used his connections in French Masonic circles. It was thanks to Franklin's diplomatic efforts within French lodges that the states received critically important support from France in the form of weapons, a fleet, and money. Secret diplomacy? Franklin was held in enormous esteem among European Masons, and even participated in the work of the famous Parisian lodge 9 Sisters, where he was personally received with honors fit for a king. The level of influence is staggering. Another vivid example of Masonic influence on politics was the French Revolution of 1789. Among its leaders, there were indeed many Masons, such as Count Mirabeau, Georges Danton, and Marquis de Lafayette. It was Lafayette, a hero of 2 revolutions, who became one of the central figures, uniting liberal-minded nobles and the bourgeoisie. He was a member of the Lodge of St. John in Paris, where ideas of constitutional monarchy and civil liberties were actively discussed. The plan was brewing behind closed doors. Moreover, Masonic lodges were one of the few platforms where representatives of various strata of French society could openly speak about the need for radical change without fearing persecution or censorship. This significantly influenced the fact that the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity became the official slogan of the revolution. Where did that wind blow from? An important example of Masonic influence was also the struggle for independence of Latin American countries in the early 19th century. And there they are again. The central figure was the legendary Simón Bolívar, who liberated Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia from Spanish rule. Bolívar joined a Masonic lodge in London as early as 1803, where he became acquainted with progressive European ideas of freedom and equality. Later, he actively used the network of Masonic connections to garner support from revolutionaries across the continent, connections shaping the fate of continents. Masonic lodges in Latin America became centers for planning uprisings, allowing people of different nationalities and social statuses to unite in a common struggle against colonialism. Thus, thanks to the Masonic network, Bolívar managed to create a broad international coalition of independence supporters. An entire army bound by secret ties. Masons also played a key role in the unification of Italy. Giuseppe Garibaldi himself, the legendary revolutionary and national hero of Italy, did not hide his membership in Masonic lodges, and was proud of it. In 1864, Garibaldi was even elected Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, right at the top. Thanks to this, he managed to unite disparate groups of revolutionaries and liberals across the country. There is evidence that Garibaldi and his supporters deliberately used Masonic symbols and rituals to strengthen the revolutionary spirit and unity among their soldiers. A brotherhood of fighters with secret signs. As a result, Italy gained national independence and became a unified state. In Britain, Masons also actively influenced political and social processes in the 18th and 19th centuries. It is known that Winston Churchill, the future Prime Minister of Great Britain, was initiated into a Masonic lodge in 1901. Although he did not become a particularly active member, nevertheless he was one of them. His membership in the Brotherhood became symbolic confirmation that Masonry had a stronghold among the British elites. Earlier, in the 19th century, British Masonic lodges actively promoted reforms in education, charity, and social aid, creating schools and shelters for the poor. Charity as a cover. Thus, Freemasonry was never a hand secretly controlling the world, as conspiracy theorists claim. Or is that just what they want us to think? In reality, it provided influential people with an intellectual platform, where ideas capable of changing society were discussed and shaped, or planned. Thanks to its high ideals, such as equality, brotherhood, and humanism, Freemasonry played a significant role in many historical events, from the American Revolution to the struggle for independence in Latin America and the unification of Italy, thus having a tangible and long-term impact on the development of world history, an influence that's hard to overstate, and which is still felt today. While in Europe, Freemasonry became an object of conspiracy theories and suspicions immediately after major revolutions. its history in Russia unfolded somewhat differently. What about in our country? Russian Masons never created secret governments and were not behind mass uprisings. Perhaps they didn't get the chance. On the contrary, Russian Masons of the 18th century were closely connected with the enlightened circles of society, often holding high positions at the imperial court. However, the attitude of Russian monarchs towards Masons changed greatly depending on the personality of the emperor and the political atmosphere in the country. The empire was playing with fire. Freemasonry penetrated Russia under Peter the Great, but its flourishing began during the reign of Catherine II, especially in the second half of the 18th century. The golden age of Russian Masons. Empress Catherine herself was never a member of Masonic lodges and regarded them with some suspicion. A clever woman, however. Among her closest circle were many high-ranking Masons who significantly influenced public and cultural life. For example, one of the influential Masons at court was Prince Alexander Mikhailovich Golitsyn, who held important state posts and enjoyed the personal trust of the Empress. The Empress's trusted confidant, he not only participated in the work of the lodges, but also contributed to the spread of Enlightenment ideas in Russian society. In those times, Masonic lodges gathered the cream of Russian nobility, from influential aristocrats and dignitaries to prominent writers and intellectuals. One of the most famous and authoritative Russian lodges was the Three Stars Lodge, established in St. Petersburg. Its ranks included such well-known figures as the journalist and publisher Nikolai Ivanovich Novikov, the senator and political figure Ivan Perfilyevich Yelagin, the writer Alexander Nikolaevich Radashev, and many others. A star-studded lineup, an important feature of Russian Masons, was their orientation not towards revolution, but towards the spiritual and moral development of society. The official story. Lodge members actively engaged in charity, opened printing presses and libraries, published magazines and books, promoting the ideas of moral self-improvement, enlightenment, and public good, sowing the seeds of reason, kindness, eternity, or something else entirely. A particularly striking example of Masonic influence in Russia was the activity of Nikolai Ivanovich Novikov. Being a staunch supporter of enlightenment, he opened a printing press and established the publication of journals and books that disseminated the advanced ideas of the time. Thanks to Novikov, works of French Enlightenment philosophers, books on natural sciences, economics, and philosophy, widely appeared in Russia. But what if these advanced ideas were dangerous to the throne? Empress Catherine the Great initially viewed such activities favorably, seeing them as means of enlightening society, but soon became worried, noticing how quickly ideas that could undermine the traditional monarchical system were spreading. Were her suspicions justified? As a result, Novikov was arrested in 1792, his printing press was closed, and the activities of Masonic lodges came under close surveillance by the authorities. With the ascension of Emperor Paul I in 1796, the Russian throne's attitude towards Masons changed dramatically. Paul was inclined to see any secret organization as a threat to the stability of his rule and political order. Fearing the influence of the revolutionary ideas of the French Revolution, he banned the activities of all Masonic lodges in 1798, and the prohibition was severe and all-encompassing. Masons who had previously held high posts were forced to publicly renounce their membership in lodges, and violators faced severe punishment, including exile and confiscation of property. The bloody millstones of repression. This ban was not just a formality, it was accompanied by real persecution. Many Russian Masons were dismissed, stripped of ranks and positions. Printing presses and publishing houses associated with Masonic circles were closed, and books and journals published under the influence of Masonic ideas were destroyed or seized. Thus, the fate of Freemasonry in 18th century Russia is a history of ups and downs, primarily due to the political moods of the monarchs. The throne didn't need secret societies. While under Catherine, the great Masons could act comparatively freely, spreading Enlightenment ideas. Under Paul I, they were subjected to cruel prohibition and persecution, which abruptly cut short their public activity and greatly altered the further history of Russian Freemasonry. their fate was sealed. But despite the ban, the ideas that Masons brought to society continued to live on in the Russian intellectual environment, inspiring subsequent generations of cultural and political figures. Even under Prohibition, their influence didn't vanish. After Paul I's strict ban, Freemasonry in Russia remained outlawed for a long time and was forced to go deep underground. Dark years of secret existence. Only with the arrival of Alexander I in 1800 did Russian Freemasonry experience a new, albeit short-lived revival. A ray of hope, the emperor was tolerant towards Masonic lodges, and in the first years of his reign, Freemasonry again gained public weight and intellectual influence. During this period, lodges increasingly became a magnet for prominent cultural figures, especially writers and publicists whose work defined the face of Russian literature and social thought for a whole century ahead. Who were these geniuses tied to the secret? A particularly vivid example of this influence was Nikolai Mikhailovich Karamzin, the greatest Russian historian and writer, author of the fundamental history of the Russian state. Karamzin did not hide his membership in Masonic lodges, actively participated in their activities, and found inspiration for his historical and philosophical reflections in the ideas of brotherhood. Could the main history of Russia truly be written under Masonic influence? It was the Masonic environment that shaped Karamzin's interest in issues of morality, humanism, and the fate of Russia, which were subsequently reflected in his historical works and literary pieces. Karamzin's circle played an important role in the formation of the 19th century Russian intelligentsia, for whom Masonic ideas of humanism and moral self-improvement were particularly appealing. Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, although not formally a member of Masonic lodges, was closely connected with people who were actively involved in their activities. The genius of Russian poetry, amidst Masonic shadows, Masonic ideas significantly influenced the poet's worldview and were reflected in his work. In particular, his close relations with the Decembrists, many of whom were Masons, are well known. The Decembrists, Masons, shock communication with them contributed to the formation of Pushkin's liberal views and was evident in his works such as Eugene Onegin and Boris Godunov. Furthermore, his poetry was permeated with reflections on freedom, morality, and the role of the individual in history, key themes discussed in Masonic circles of that time. Coincidence. Another notable representative of Freemasonry in Russian culture was Alexander Fyodorovich Labzin, a philosopher, writer, and publisher who actively promoted ideas of enlightenment and moral self-improvement. In the 1810s, he published the journal Sion Vestnik, Sion Messenger, which became a center of the spiritual life of Russian society at the time. A journal with a mysterious name, its pages published philosophical articles, translations of foreign thinkers, and materials directly related to Masonic philosophy. The publication was very successful among the enlightened public and made ideas of moral self-improvement and public service widely known among the Russian elite. The elite, again, secret ideas again, however. After the Decembrist uprising in 1825, the government of Nicholas I again unleashed repression on Masonic lodges, which were now perceived by the authorities as hotbeds of free thinking and a threat to the monarchy. Bloody retribution. Over the following decades, Freemasonry existed in Russia solely underground, significantly lost its influence, and effectively ceased open activity. A brief revival of Freemasonry occurred in the early 20th century when, after the 1905 revolution, various social and intellectual movements in Russia were reactivated. Lodges reappeared in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and major cities of the Russian Empire, but their activities were not as noticeable or influential as in the 18th or 19th centuries. A faint echo of past power, after the October Revolution of 1917, the new Soviet government instantly declared Masonic organizations outlawed, viewing them as anti-Soviet and bourgeois, a new wave of persecution. Masons were forced into mass emigration, with many prominent lodge members finding themselves in exile, primarily in France and other European countries. In exile, Russian Masons attempted to preserve the traditions of the Brotherhood. Russian Masonic lodges were established in Paris and other European capitals, with many prominent figures of Russian culture and immigrant intelligentsia among their members, including writers Ivan Bunin, Dmitry Merezhkovsky, and philosopher Nikolai Berdyaev. Their ties remained strong, even overseas, but cut off from their homeland, losing all sway over happenings in Soviet Russia, and with the older generation of Russian émigrés gradually fading away, the Masonic movement slowly withered. In the Soviet Union throughout the entire 20th century, Freemasonry remained under a complete ban. It was considered an ideological enemy, a secret organization incompatible with the communist system. Totalitarian darkness couldn't stand secrets. Only at the century's close, during the Perestroika era and after the Soviet collapse, did attempts emerge to rekindle Masonic lodges in Russia. But this was a wholly changed political and social landscape, devoid of their old power and broad backing, a shadow of the past in a new reality. Today, Freemasonry isn't just a relic of the past, it's a living social phenomenon, albeit significantly less mysterious than before. Or is it an expertly crafted illusion? Modern Masonic organizations operate openly in almost all countries worldwide, yet myths about them are still widely spread. No smoke without fire. But what is the Brotherhood like today, and what's its true role? According to the latest estimates, there are around 6 million Freemasons in the world today. Their numbers vary by country. A whole army, the biggest concentration. The USA, home to over 2 million lodge members, there's the power. American Freemasonry is known for its particular openness, or just for show. In the USA, Masonic lodges engage in public activities, hold official events, and even organize tours of their historic buildings for the general public. They only show you what they want you to see. In second place by membership is the UK, with around 200,000 members. Here, Masonic organizations are also quite active. They openly publish membership lists, hold charity events, and support numerous public initiatives. Charity, again, in Western Europe, Freemasonry has a long tradition and maintains stable numbers. For example, France has around 150,000 Masons and Germany around 100,000. Lodges continue to accept new members, and interest in Freemasonry has noticeably grown in recent decades, especially among middle-aged people and those in creative professions. The ranks are growing. In Eastern Europe, Masonic organizations are relatively small in number, but after the collapse of the USSR and the Socialist bloc, they began to gradually recover and now operate in almost all countries in the region. A rebirth from the ashes. So what do modern Masonic lodges really do? Here's the main question. Firstly, Freemasonry has retained its traditional purpose. It remains a community where people can discuss moral, philosophical, and intellectual questions in an atmosphere of mutual respect and equality. In an atmosphere of secrecy, modern Masons regularly gather for meetings, conduct rituals and discussions, and study philosophical works and historical documents. But today, their discussions supposedly lack the secret character that spawned so many myths in the past. Or has it become even more secretive? However, the main focus of 21st century Masons is charity and social work, unexpected right. For example, in the USA and the UK, Masons donate tens of millions of dollars annually to medical research, aid for children's hospitals, support for educational programs in universities, and social projects worldwide. Where do they get that kind of money? Masonic organizations fund hospitals, provide assistance to children with serious illnesses, organize free clinics, and offer aid programs for the poor and elderly. In some countries, like the USA, Masonic hospitals and medical centers are considered among the best in terms of service and medical care. Impressive, or an investment in loyalty. Another important area of activity for modern Masons is the support of education and culture. Lodges often sponsor educational institutions, provide scholarships for talented students, and fund programs for preserving historical heritage and restoring architectural monuments. For example, in the UK, Masons regularly donate large sums for the restoration of historic buildings, not just those related to the Brotherhood, but also those of simple cultural and national value. Influence on culture and history. As for political influence, modern Masons differ significantly from their predecessors in the 18th and 19th centuries. Today, Freemasonry emphatically stresses its apolitical nature. Believe that lodges prohibit open discussion of political and religious issues at meetings to avoid divisions and conflicts within the brotherhood. This rule is observed almost universally and strictly controlled by the leadership of Masonic organizations. The perfect cover for backroom deals? For this reason, the real influence of Masons on politics and decision-making today is minimal and significantly less than the level they held in the past, or so it seems. Despite the openness and transparency of modern lodges, Freemasonry continues to provoke many myths and mistrust among some people accustomed to seeing hidden motives and secret goals behind it. Are they justified in their suspicions? In reality, 21st century Freemasonry represents a social organization with a philosophical bent, primarily aimed at moral self-improvement, mutual aid, and charity. That's the official version. Modern Masons openly talk about their goals, publish information about members and events, and try to maintain a positive public image, dispelling centuries-old myths and speculations. But what aren't they telling us? Freemasonry has long become not just a subject for historians, but also a vivid image in popular culture. Hollywood knows a good hook. In modern cinema, literature, and even video games, it is regularly used as a central theme or an important plot element. The reason is simple. The mystery of the Masons, their secret rituals, unusual symbolism, and centuries-old history easily capture attention and ignite the public imagination. The public craves mystery. Perhaps the most famous example of this cultural influence is the book by American writer Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. Boom. While the novel formally delves into the secrets of the Catholic Church and societies, linked to ancient mystical mysteries, it significantly piqued interest in the Masons as well, catapulting the secret society into one of the most popular topics of the early 21st century. Brown's subsequent works, especially The Lost Symbol, are directly connected to Masons and their legends. In these books, the Brotherhood is presented as a guardian of ancient secrets and knowledge, possessing significant influence on world events. Millions believed it. Despite the author's artistic exaggerations and fantasies, such works significantly influenced the perception of Freemasonry, making it a subject of discussion and public interest worldwide. Another striking example is the famous film National Treasure starring Nicolas Cage, where the plot is built around the search for secret knowledge and treasures guarded for centuries by Masons. A hunt for Masonic treasure. The film is not only an exciting adventure blockbuster but also a picture in which Masons are depicted as keepers of important historical and cultural heritage. Although the film itself doesn't claim historical accuracy, it played an important role in popularizing the image of Freemasonry among a wide audience. In literature, besides Dan Brown's books, there are dozens of novels where Freemasonry plays a key role. One notable example is the book Foucault's Pendulum, by Italian writer Umberto Eco. In this deep and intellectual novel, Masonic and occult societies act as a central element of a complex narrative that explores the nature of human belief in conspiracies and mysticism. Eco uses Freemasonry not so much to describe real historical facts, but to ponder the phenomenon of belief and its influence on society. Belief in conspiracies. Video games also actively use the image of Masons. The famous game series Assassin's Creed directly addresses the theme of secret societies, Illuminati, and Masons, portraying them as participants in a centuries-old conflict, an eternal battle of good versus evil, fought in Masonic lodges. These games are highly popular, and their plots, built on alternative history and conspiracy theories, have significantly influenced the perception of Masons in the public consciousness, especially among young people. Despite the fantastical and fictional nature of the plots, they have spawned a whole generation of fans genuinely interested in the history of the Brotherhood and the secrets associated with it. However, it's worth noting that such widespread cultural use of the image of Masons doesn't always work in their favor. Books, films, and games often significantly distort the real historical facts and nature of Freemasonry, creating a false impression of what modern lodges actually do, or is it a deliberate distortion to hide the truth? On the other hand, such popularity attracts public attention to the history of Freemasonry, prompting many people to delve deeper into the subject and separate fiction from real facts. Thus, Freemasonry today has become firmly embedded in popular culture as a symbol of mystery, ancient knowledge, and enigmatic rituals. Works related to Masons generate immense interest, stimulate discussions and debates, and make the public ponder questions of history, morality, and spirituality. Perhaps the most important point is that it's precisely thanks to this influence on mass culture that Freemasonry remains part of humanity's living history today, a history that isn't over yet, and one that perhaps still holds many unraveled secrets.